Welcome to Global Campus. Every year, tens of thousands of students cross the thresholds of the world's most powerful universities. They arrive with the grades, the ambition, and the belief, reasonable, well-founded, that merit got them there, and that merit will carry them forward. They are not wrong, but they are not entirely right either, because inside these institutions, there is a second system, and it decides outcomes in ways your grades never will. It has no official website. It does not appear on your offer letter. It will not come up during orientation week, and whether it ever opens its doors to you will depend on factors that have nothing to do with your academic record. This episode is about that second system, what it is, where it came from, what it actually delivers, and most importantly, what knowing about it changes for you. The story of elite secret societies does not begin with power, it begins with exclusion. In the early 1800s, American colleges were formerly Protestant institutions. Catholics, Jews, and anyone without the right family name were made to feel it. The first Greek fraternities and literary societies emerged, in part as spaces where students locked out of the official culture could build their own. The Phi Beta Kappa, now the oldest academic honor society in the United States, was founded in 1776 as a secret society. The secrecy was not arrogance, it was self-protection. But here's the turn that defines everything else that follows. Within decades, these same societies became the gatekeepers. The mechanism flipped from refuge to filter. And once that happens, the system stops being about protection and starts being about power. Groups that began by asking, who are we keeping out, became groups asking, who are we letting in? And then a second filter appeared, one that operated quietly beneath the invitation itself. Membership was never free. The Porcelain Club at Harvard carries no published dues, but the social expectation of spending is steep and consistent. This is not incidental. It is structural. You can receive an invitation and still be unable to afford to accept it. The cost layer filters out people the invitation layer might otherwise have admitted. Two locks on the same door. On the other side of the Atlantic, the story is older and more honest about what it is. Oxford's dining clubs grew out of aristocratic tradition that predates the concept of meritocracy altogether. They're not pretending to reward talent. They were explicitly about class reproduction, who your family was, which school you attended before Oxford, and whether the right people were prepared to vouch for you. The Bullingdon Club, founded in the late 18th century, evolved into something that made its own privilege theatrical. Formal tailcoats, expensive private dinners, a documented culture of destroying restaurant property and paying the bill the next morning. Not despite the destruction, but because of it. The ability to cause damage and absorb the cost without consequence was the status signal. The money was the message. Boris Johnson, David Cameron, George Osborne. 3 men, 1 dining club, a decade of British power. But there is a dimension to this that rarely gets named directly. The Bullingdon was all mill. Skull and Bones at Yale University did not admit women until 1992, that is, 160 years after its founding. The Porcelain at Harvard remains mill only to this day. The Cambridge Apostles admitted their first woman in 1970. This matters beyond the principle. The professional pipelines these societies created the cabinet seats, the CIA directorships, the board placements were pipelines from which women were structurally excluded for most of their history, and in some cases still are. Women from the right class background attended the same universities, achieved the same results, and were still locked out of the informal infrastructure, not by accident, but by design. If you want to understand how exclusive societies moved from interesting tradition to something structurally significant, you need to look at Skull and Bones at Yale University, founded in 1832. Each year, Skull and Bones selects 15 students. That is the entire intake, 15 people. Since its founding, its membership has included presidents of the United States, directors of the CIA, senators, cabinet secretaries, and Supreme Court justices at a frequency that cannot be dismissed as coincidence without engaging seriously with the numbers. In 2004, Americans thought they were choosing between two different futures. What they were actually choosing between was two members of the same network. The United States presidential election was contested between George W. Bush, Skull and Bones, Yale University class of 1968, and John Kerry, Skull and Bones, Yale University class of 1966. Both men were asked about their membership in national television interviews. Both declined to discuss it. Two men, one secret society, one university, the highest office on earth. Now, a serious counter-argument exists, and it deserves to be stated clearly. Some researchers argue this pattern reflects selection bias, not causation. Already privileged students join these societies. Already privileged students go on to the elite careers. The society is a symptom, not a cause. That argument has real merit. We will return to it. But the pattern itself is data, and data requires explanation. Set aside the ritual and the mystery for a moment. Focus on the practical question. What does membership in one of these societies actually get you? 4 things, and they compound. First is the social capital, access to a network of people predisposed to trust you before you've done anything to earn it. A partner takes your call. A senior executive replies to your email, not because of your CV or your resume, but because you share a membership. That membership acts like a pre-verified credential, a signal that someone somewhere already vetted you. And in a world where opportunities move through relationships, that kind of trust is incredibly valuable. Second is economic capital, job referrals, investor introductions, board opportunities, not through open applications, but through quiet conversations. Research from institutions like the National Bureau of Economic Research shows that networks formed inside elite subgroups are a meaningful predictor of early career outcomes, even when you control for academic performance. In simple terms, who you know can matter as much as what you know. A third is political capital. The Bullingdon to cabinet pipeline is documented. The Skull and Bones to government pipeline is documented. When people from the same informal network occupy positions across government, finance, and media at the same time, you don't just get influence, you get alignment. They don't need to coordinate. They already share assumptions, relationships, and long-standing obligations. This is not a conspiracy. It is something more durable than a conspiracy. It is a structure. And fourth, the one most people miss entirely: temporal capital. The society does not end at graduation. A 45-year-old member will take a call from a 23-year-old member they have never met, not out of generosity, but out of obligation, an obligation installed decades earlier and never switched off. What looks like a student club is in reality a long-term network contract. The undergraduate experience is just the entry point. What you are being recruited into is a 40-year system of pre-built trust. And that is the actual product. The dinners, the rituals, the secrecy, that's just the packaging. By the 20th century, the Russell Group universities in the United Kingdom had begun to open officially to students from across the former British Empire, students from Nigeria, from Ghana, India, the Caribbean, arriving with scholarships, with ambition, and with a reasonable expectation that a place at Oxford or Cambridge universities meant a place in the world these universities produced. What they found was an official institution that was open and an unofficial institution that was not. The dining clubs did not extend invitations. The secret societies did not recruit across those lines. The networks that had been operating for over a century had no mechanism and no motivation to include them. The result was a generation of exceptionally credentialed people who graduated with a degree but without the informal infrastructure the degree was supposed to unlock. They had the certificate. They did not always get the room. But something else happened, and it does not get told often enough. Some of those students built their own networks, the African Caribbean societies at Oxford and Cambridge, the historically black fraternities and sororities in the United States, Alpha Phi, Alpha Delta Sigma Theta, the Divine Nine, which today count among their alumni some of the most significant figures in American public life. Professional associations built by Nigerian, Ghanaian, and Kenyan graduates across London, New York, and Toronto. These were not consolation prizes. Some became genuinely powerful with alumni pipelines, mentorship infrastructure, and professional reach that rivals the institutions they were built in response to. The question worth sitting with is this: did they replicate the exclusionary model they formed against, or did they build something structurally different, more open, more portable, more deliberately designed for people who know what it feels like to be on the outside of a closed door? The answer, depending on who you ask, is both. Before we close, the strongest version of the opposing argument deserves a fair hearing. There are serious scholars who argue that the influence of these societies is overstated. Their core claim is simple: these groups don't create success, they select for it. The children of senators and CEOs become senators and CEOs. The society is just where they met along the way. On this view, the handshake matters less than the family. The club matters less than the class. And if that's true, then the real solution isn't to dismantle dining clubs or secret societies. It is to change who gets into the university in the first place. That is a credible argument. But now look at what happens when institutions try to act on it. In 2016, Harvard University introduced sanctions against members of final clubs. Students involved would be barred from university captaincies, blocked from key leadership roles, and disqualified from major fellowships, including the Rhodes Scholarship. The goal was clear: break the link between exclusive social membership and institutional advantage. Here's what actually happened. Within 2 years, most clubs had gone co-ed on paper. In practice, very little changed. Enforcement weakened, oversight faded. The clubs adapted and continued. Across the Atlantic, the pattern looks familiar. University of Oxford has faced repeated calls to distance itself from the Bullingdon Club. It has never done so formally. The university's position is consistent. What students do in private is not its responsibility. And that is the pattern across countries and across centuries. These societies are not loosely attached to elite institutions. They are embedded within them. So reforms that treat them as surface level problems, something that can be sanctioned away, keep failing because the societies are not the root cause. They are the mechanism through which an older system continues to reproduce itself. So here's what we want you to take from this. The existence of these networks is not a reason to be discouraged. It is a reason to be precise, to understand that the university you're entering has two systems, a visible architecture and an invisible one. And the invisible one, the informal layer, often moves faster, reaches further, and lasts longer. But once you can see it, you are no longer outside it. You can navigate it, you can replicate it, and in some cases, you can build it differently. Some people will tell you this no longer matters, that platforms like LinkedIn have leveled the playing field, that the world is flat and the handshake is dead. Look at the evidence and decide for yourself, because what the data shows is this. Digital platforms have made weak connections cheaper. They have not replaced strong ones. A private WhatsApp group of 7 partners from the same dining club will still move faster than your connection request. A warm introduction from a Skull and Bones alumnus will still open doors that a cold email cannot. The old infrastructure didn't disappear, it adapted. But here's what matters just as much. The model itself, a small, high-trust network with long-term obligations and pre-verified credibility, is not patented, it is not protected, and it has already been replicated by people who had every reason to build something different. Because the people who shape the world are not always the most qualified. They are often the most connected, and connection, unlike talent, is something you can build deliberately. The door was never labeled. Now you know it exists, and more importantly, you now know it can be built. If this episode changed how you see elite universities, then you're starting to see Global Campus the way it was meant to be seen. This isn't just about where people study, it's about how power moves through the institutions that shape the world. Subscribe, like, and share if you want to understand the systems behind the names and the realities behind the rankings. I am Adeola Komolafe Aluem. Thank you for watching.